Recently, I discovered the anime Attack on Titan via a close friend's recommendation, and I decided to marathon the first 3 seasons to see what the fuss was about and why my friend was so in love with this show. While watching it, I got an eerie sense of familiarity from the narrative and characters, as though I had previously memorized its themes and plotline from somewhere else. It sounds a tad crazy to compare an anime/manga to a AAA video game, but I'm grateful for the overlapping themes which contribute to my current video analysis, specifically the representation of cycles and levels of violence, the breaking of these cycles, as well as the impact of traumas on the characters of both universes are my main points of reference in my examination. This video will try to explore 3 main questions. How are cycles and levels of violence formed? How do traumas affect the characters and push them to commit acts of violence? And how can cycles of violence be broken? In the 1960s, Canadian psychiatrist Vivian Rakoff noted the first observations of intergenerational trauma among descendants of Holocaust survivors at the Jewish General Hospital in Montreal. The concept of intergenerational trauma is defined as a shared experience of trauma among a group of people, which results in collective suffering and, if not dealt with through therapy or other forms of treatment, can lead to the transmission of trauma to the next generations. Trauma is the result of having experienced genocide, violence, or unstable living conditions, and survivors often suffer from PTSD, depression, and long-term health consequences. In Attack on Titan, the theme of collective trauma makes up the historical background of both the anime and the manga and serves as a trigger for subsequent cycles of violence. For example, Emir Fritz's descendants subjugated the nation of Mali with the 9 Titans and founded the Eldian Empire. The conquest of Mali is the first instance of trauma being inflicted upon Malians at a collective level. A few centuries later, a civil war broke out within the Eldian Empire and led to the resurrection of the nation of Mali, causing a group of Eldians to relocate to Paradis Island. The new Malian forces came out of the war triumphant and rounded the remaining Eldians in internment camps, where Eldians have to wear armbands, reminiscent of the racism facing Jewish people under Nazi Germany. The restoration of Mali and the treatment of Eldians by Malians can be considered an act of revenge and punishment for the traumas that previous Eldian rulers had inflicted upon Malians. In the first few episodes of Season 4 of the anime, we can see that Mali is waging wars on the Mideast Alliance, aiming to oppress the rest of the world with the powers of the Titans. The Malian authorities weaponize Eldians through the warrior unit in order to train the next generations of child soldiers who would potentially be selected to inherit the powers of the Titans. The same type of cycles of violence at a larger, collective scale can also be observed in The Last of Us Part 2, particularly the conflict between the Washington Liberation Front and the Seraphites. Long story short, the WLF is a militaristic faction who had defeated the government following the outbreak of the cordyceps infection. In Part 2, their leader, Isaac, is preparing for a massive operation against a rival group, the Seraphites, who had started out as a religion by a female prophet, yet degenerated into a cult following her death.
Ooh, someone wants to get laid.
And has been organizing skirmishes and raids against the WLF. Both groups fight over the control of what's left of Seattle, and thus continuing to inflict traumas upon one another to perpetuate the cycles of violence. Not only are the inflicting and inheriting of traumas visible at a collective level, but they'll also manifest in individual characters' mindsets, experiences, and actions. The action-packed pilot episode of Attack on Titan puts on display Eren's traumatic experience of seeing Titans destroying his home community and his mother being devoured by a Titan. Witnessing his mother's death is a major trigger event for his determination to kill all Titans and sets up his revenge quest as well as his entry into the cycle of violence. Later in the anime, viewers also get a glimpse of Eren's other traumas, namely his slaughter of human traffickers who captured Mikasa to rescue her, and his loose relationship with his father who was almost absent in his childhood. Another character in Attack on Titan whose background and portrayal fascinate me is Reiner. Reiner seems obviously a villain in seasons 2 and 3, but just like The Last of Us, the world is not so black and white, which is a testament to both universes' brilliant storytelling and character developments. Reiner was born to an Eldian mother and a Marleyan father, but his father rejects him because of his Eldian blood, calling him and his mother devils. When presented with the opportunity to join a warrior unit, Reiner doesn't hesitate and considers his enrollment in the Marleyan army as a way not to only be loved by his family and express his love for his family, but eventually attaining the status of honorary Marleyan, but also to redeem his humanity through his vow to defeat Paradis Island's Eldians in order to earn the love and respect from Marleyan society. Entering the warrior unit is Reiner's gateway into a new cycle of violence. Similarly, in The Last of Us, our beloved characters are also shaped by their traumas. Long before the events of the first and second games started, the comic series American Dreams sheds light on Ellie's past in a Boston QZ. She was known for having misbehaved and had violent outbursts, and even acted on her anger to fight other kids at her military school. Ellie's mother died after having given birth to her, and in her last breaths she penned a letter for Ellie to read sometime in the future. Growing up without a family and in an unforgiving world, she had to learn to survive on her own. Furthermore, in the Left Behind DLC, no sooner had she developed a relationship with Riley than the latter died from a bite during their adventure together in an abandoned mall. Ellie was bitten by an infected, but due to her immunity, she didn't turn and had to watch her best friend die. We also discover Ellie's worst fear in this following scene.
How is it that you're never scared?
Who says that I'm not?
What are you scared of?
Let's see. Scorpions are pretty creepy. Being by myself. I'm scared of ending up alone.
Which foreshadows the events of Part 2. In Part 2, Ellie is forced to watch Abby and her group slowly torture and kill Joel, and Ellie is caught up in a new cycle of violence, embedded in a larger cycle of violence.
Joel, get up! Joel, fucking get up! Please stop! Please don't do this! Joel, please get up! No! Fucking kill you! Fucking kill you!
The new cycle was already initiated by Joel's decision to smuggle Ellie across the country and kill all the Fireflies at the end of Part 1 in order to save her. Let's also not forget Ellie's traumatic experience with David's cannibal group and what David was about to do to her in the burning restaurant in the winter section of Part 1. As for Abby, her side of the story is revealed in the second half of the game. We find out through flashbacks that the surgeon whom Joel killed at the end of part 1 was actually Abby's father, Jerry. She broke down in her friend's arms as she saw his bloodied, lifeless body in the operating room, even though just moments ago they were rescuing a zebra together just outside of St. Mary's Hospital. Present-day Abby still visibly reeling from Jerry's death as her PTSD is manifested through her nightmares. The deaths of Aaron's mother, Joel, and Jerry are all losses of our protagonist's parental figures. They all vow to avenge their loved one and make revenge their obsession.
I'm gonna find. And I'm gonna kill. Every last one of them.
俺は巨人を殺せ。一匹残せ。
Our protagonists' individual revenge quest would require them to become something they are not, and their transformation causes them to be fully immersed into many different cycles of violence. In both The Last of Us and Attack on Titan, humanity faces blatant threats from the outside, such as the infected and Titans. While Marleyan propaganda demonizes Eldians in internment zones and on Paradis Island, residents of Paradis Island see Titans as the biggest threat to humanity, until the truth is revealed later in the anime. The infected in The Last of Us are obviously the enemies that need to be eliminated, and in a way the infected and Titans are portrayed as human mortality. Being bitten by an infected will result in death in The Last of Us, whereas inheriting the power of a Titan will reduce an Eldian's lifespan to just 13 years, in addition to turning into a pure Titan as a death sentence for many Eldian restorationists, not to mention the threat that the pure Titans pose to Paradis Islanders. Nevertheless, I believe that in both universes, the biggest threat always comes from within humanity, which adds complexity and nuances to each of the two stories. Certainly, the world is a cruel place. Ellie and Abby grew up in a cordyceps-ravaged world, while Aaron and company lived within the confines of walls built by lies upon lies. But if we consider the influence of Hobbesian philosophy on both universes, our beloved characters live in a quasi-state of nature where man is a wolf to another man, and survival is the highest priority. Infected and Titans are simply distractions from humanity's entrenched problems of violence and racism. Ironically, Aaron, Annie, Bertold, and Rainer are all humans with Titan shape-shifting abilities, meaning that humanity's fate is at its own mercy.
巨人に地上を支配される前、人類は種族や断りの違う者同士で果てのない殺し合いを続けていたと言われておる。その時に誰かが言ったそうな。もし人類以外の強大な敵が現れたら、人類は一丸となり争いをやめるだろうと。お主はどう思うかの？
そんな言い伝えがあるんですか？それは随分とのんきですね。あくびが出ます。
お主もわしと同じで品性がひん曲がっておる。
その強大な敵にここまで追い詰められた今でも一つになったとは言い難い状況だと思いますので。
Moreover, the truth is often hidden from our protagonists. Joel's lie at the end of part 1 sets up perfectly Ellie's quest for the truth in part 2. We also witness Abby's evolution from her status as the WLF's top scar killer to a defector in the course of just 3 days. Her decision to help two runaway Seraphite kids, Lev and Yara, is her moment of discovering the truth about the enemies, quote-unquote, that the WLF propaganda has demonized. Similarly, Marley's propaganda apparatus is so sophisticated that it has successfully brainwashed Marleyans into believing that all Eldians are demons for decades. All our protagonists are children who had to grow up too fast due to their personal traumas and the ruthless worlds in which they were thrown. Instead of having moments of joy and innocence, they are forced to endure and survive in societies that lie to them, experiment on them, treat them as expendables, and instill monsters in their minds and within them. These lyrics and words speak for themselves and for all our protagonists. In order to defeat Titans, Eren ironically becomes the thing he hates the most. Aina, just like Eren, literally becomes a monster by transforming into the armored Titan to wreak havoc on Paradis Island. Viewers also discover the truth about Marco's death in Season 2. Aina orders Bertol and Arnie to remove Marco's ODM gear and leaves Marco to be devoured by a Titan in order to prevent Marco from revealing his and Bertol's true identities to other teammates. Abby's determination to become a soldier, even to attain the reputation of the WLF's top scar killer, mirrors Aina's hubris to become a warrior. In order to embark on a revenge quest, Abby had to transform herself physically to fulfill her wish. She has worked tirelessly since joining the WLF, and even deeming her training a higher priority than spending time with her boyfriend Owen. When given the opportunity to explore the WLF's base, players can see a gym in the stadium, as well as Abby's workout equipment, workout schedule, and even personal records. These choices in environmental design and storytelling further elucidate Abby's motivation and background character development, something at which Naughty Dog excels. In some player eyes, she is literally a monster, not only because she ended Joel's life, but also due to her unconventional physique for a female, which is inherently misogynistic and ignites nasty transphobic discourse.
Stay on your island.
In the process of seeking revenge, Ellie becomes so obsessed with her objective to the point of neglecting her lover's well-being, as well as risking Jesse's life. Worse, she mindlessly eliminates anyone standing in her way and monstrously tortures and kills Nora, in addition to stabbing Owen and pregnant Mel to death. The theatre clash between her and Abby puts Ellie in the role of her former tormentor in Part 1, David, as she quietly hunts down Abby and places trap mines around the backstage. After the Seattle events, Ellie is further traumatized and looks more like a drug addict than just a girl that we once knew and rooted for. She is not just a girl now, but also a threat.
I'm just a girl, not a threat.
All our protagonists share similar personality traits. They are all hot-headed and stubborn kids who think in black and white and nurture pure hatred towards enemies whom they don't even understand, and they will have to face the consequences of their actions. The transformation into monsters and the reenactment of traumas are our protagonists and survivors' coping mechanisms to fight off the feeling of powerlessness. However, these strategies can backfire and lead to re-traumatization, according to the work of psychiatrist Judith Herman. Ellie's re-traumatization manifests through her guilt and devastation after having tortured and killed Nora in the spore-filled basement of the hospital. On her third day in Seattle, she kills Mel and Owen in her reenactment of Joel's previous interrogation technique, and becomes disgusted with herself once she finds out that Mel was pregnant. During the confrontation with Abby at the theatre, Ellie is almost beaten to death, and Abby even has an unconscious Dina at knife point, and it's thanks to Lev's intervention that Abby lets Dina and Ellie live. This revenge quest clearly has taken a toll on Ellie's physical and psychological health, as well as costing her loved ones' well-being and lives, And later at the farm, you can see that she still blames herself for indirectly causing Jesse's death and not successfully avenging Joel's. Her PTSD worsens as she is triggered by a falling shovel in the barn, which sends her back to the day where she had to witness Joel's death. She doesn't eat, she doesn't sleep, she's barely human anymore. Tommy also has to deal with the aftermath of his revenge trip. He is permanently incapacitated and lost an eye after the theatre face-off. In addition to his divorce, he has become spiteful and even berates Ellie for not immediately going after Abby when he visits Ellie and Dina at the farm. Tommy's guilt-tripping contributes to Ellie's eventual relapse and resurrection of her revenge project in Santa Barbara. Little did Abby know that her actions would have dire consequences. Her revenge quest and confidence in her abilities would cost all of her friends' lives as Ellie and Tommy slowly hunt them down one by one. She even has to witness Manny's death as his blood spills all over her face while being sniped by Tommy. She had spent years training very hard just to see her life fall apart in the span of 3 days. As a parallel to The Last of Us, many of Aaron's friends have died in the collective battle against the Titans. Marco, Mina, Thomas, and many others. Even Mikasa almost kicked the bucket when facing the Titan form of Daniel Fritz if Aaron didn't use his Titan command, and Armin was burnt to death by the Colossal Titan and was only revived thanks to the Titan Serum. When being chained up in the Fritz Chapel, Aaron, having been through so much trauma and seen so many deaths, even begged Historia to take the Titan Serum and put an end to his misery. The cycle of violence has also proven damaging for Rainer. He lost Marcel in his expedition to Paradis Island, causing him to develop dissociative personality disorder. He blamed himself for Marcel's death, and his DPD worsened and took over him after he had left Marco to die. Later, Annie was captured by the Survey Corps, whereas Bertol was defeated by Aaron and company. Back in Marley, realizing that he failed his mission and lost his 2 friends, Rainer is on the verge of suicide at the beginning of Season 4. He has also started to see through Marley's propaganda about Eldians in Paradis Island. His initial mission had him infiltrate Paradis Island to retrieve the founding Titan, yet he ended up fraternizing with its residents and respecting his regiment comrades. He had to fight with his conscience to remain loyal to his warrior identity and Marley throughout his mission, but he wound up even more traumatized. At a larger scale, communities also face consequences for engaging in cycles of violence. While the WLF is completely destroyed and their leader is shot dead amidst the invasion of Seraphites Island, the Seraphites' home is in shambles because of the WLF's assault. Similarly, Marley and Eldia have been destroying and enslaving each other for centuries, and it is now Eldians in internment zones who are punished for the sins of their ancestors. As I have mentioned, cycles of violence break up families and communities and annihilate any support system for the group or individual enduring traumas. Nonetheless, groups and individuals have the choice to do better, dismantle these deep-rooted cycles, and recover from the traumas. It's only in the last flashback of Part 2 that players understand what really happened that night on Joel's front porch. After years of having questioned Joel's reply at the end of Part 1, Ellie eventually found out what had really happened at the Firefly Hospital in Salt Lake City. She subsequently distanced herself from her father figure, even to the point of subjecting him to emotional violence and punishing him for having taken away her life purpose. The last flashback tells us that Ellie was ready to break this emotional violence and try to forgive Joel, yet the only opportunity to do so was robbed from her the next morning, when Abby's group ambushed Joel and Tommy. Therefore, Abby and her group took away Ellie's only chance at doing better with Joel. During the idyllic sequence on the farm, Ellie has the choice of staying with Dina and JJ or going after Abby in Santa Barbara, and she chooses the latter. Despite Dina's plea and attempt to help Ellie get out of the cycle of violence, Ellie blindly believes that the only way to bring Joel back is to kill Abby. breaking apart her little family in doing so. In Santa Barbara, after fighting through the Rattler's base, Ellie staggers to the beach just to find a beleaguered Abby and an unconscious Lev strung up to a pole and left out in the open to rot as a punishment for having tried to run away. When Ellie cuts Abby down, we sense a glimmer of hope that she's about to walk away out of pity for the duo, but the next moment she threatens to kill Lev if Abby doesn't fight her. In this bloody finale, two broken women tiredly fight each other, and it has to take a flashback of Joel to help Ellie break the cycle of violence and let Abby and Lev go. For Abby, her path to redemption started when she met and saved Yara and Lev in the forest. Never in her life had she imagined being this close to the enemies, quote-unquote, let alone saving them and coming back for them the next morning to save them again. Her determination to help the siblings stems from her guilt for leaving them to their own devices, despite the fact that they were being hunted by their own people, and she even has a nightmare about their death. She even ventures into the most dangerous section of the WLF's hospital, where the outbreak in Seattle had first started, and defeats a mutated infected to get life-saving medical supplies for Yara. Abby's change of heart reminds me of Owen. He seems like the more moderate voice of reason in her group, even though he wants Joel dead as much as she does. Symbolically, when Owen says this to Abby,
End it. Now.
He sees the potential of a looming cycle of violence, and people whom he cares about may end up paying the price for Abby's revenge quest. He sees that torturing Joel is not bringing Abby any closure. Her action is simply further traumatizing her psyche. He shows signs of discomfort when Abby is still busy golfing Joel in a disturbing sequence of slow torture, and orders her to stop, symbolically pleading her to get out of the cycle of violence. Later in Abby's section, we find out that Owen goes MIA due to his devastation after having to kill his friend Daniel in order to defend an old and powerless Seraphite enemy. Owen hides in the aquarium and starts fixing the sailboat to rejoin the Fireflies, rumored to be based somewhere in Santa Barbara, in a desperate attempt to run away from the cycle of violence perpetuated by the WLF and the Seraphites. On her third day, Abby has to go to the Seraphite Island with Yara to rescue Lev. They are all caught up in the WLF's invasion of the Seraphites' home, as Abby is spotted helping the siblings by her group and her leader. The encounter with Isaac leads to Yara's sacrifice to help Abby and Lev run away. This scene is followed by one of the best lines in the game in my opinion.
She's gone. Come on, those were your fucking people. You're my people.
Back to the aquarium. Abby is devastated to find her dog, lover and friend dead. She finds Ellie's map and tracks her down to the theatre where one of the most terrifying fights takes place. Eventually, Abby has the upper hand and incapacitates Ellie, and as she's about to slit Dina's throat, a distraught Lev begs her to stop. In this moment, Abby, with Lev as her voice of reason, decides to walk away from the cycle of violence and truly moves forward with her redemption. In Attack on Titan, I reckon the segment that best illustrates the burden of choice is Levi's dilemma between saving the best commander and his best friend Irvin, and saving Armin. While the latter is one of humanity's best prospects and one of the most intelligent soldiers, the former is humanity's best chance at winning the war against the Titans. In the end, Levi chooses to save Armin, despite his love and respect for Irvin. We cannot deny Irvin's brilliance and experience as a commander, but his deeds also bring plenty of risks and lead to many casualties among his troops. By saving Armin, not only does Levi resuscitate a character whose astute observations have led to many discoveries and winning strategies for the squad, but he also acknowledges Armin's dream of seeing the ocean, of seeing the world beyond the walls, of seeing a beautiful world beyond violence, beyond the binarism of good versus bad. Let's rewind to this conversation.
潮が山ほどあるだけじゃない。炎の水、氷の大地、砂の雪原。きっと外の世界はこの壁の中の何倍も広いんだ。僕たちもいつか外の世界を探検できるといいね。
And this conversation that Levi overhears the night before retaking War Moriah.
まずは海を見に行こうよ。見てろよ。絶 あるんだから。
Levi already makes his choice to save Armin at this point. I believe that the most important and the most human choice that all our characters make is to see beyond the traumatic past and the weight of the present, instead of seeing everything through the binary lens of good versus evil. For instance, Joel, a man who had lost his daughter and gone through so much trauma himself, wanted to give Ellie a better future by saving her from the Fireflies, because of his love for her and his desire to give her a life worth living, at the expense of his life and the truth. Likewise, Abby finds a new purpose and a life worth living by taking care of Lev and traveling to Catalina Island to reunite with her Firefly comrades. And Ellie moves closer to her recovery by voluntarily removing herself from the cycle of violence and choosing to remember the image of a loving Joel in his last moments, a Joel who will always want her to be happy. Breaking cycles of violence requires a shift of perspective, whether the act comes from fictional characters or the players and viewers themselves. In The Last of Us universe, we have been conditioned to root for Ellie and Joel since the first game. Likewise, in Attack on Titan, we naturally root for Eren, Armin, Mikasa and the rest of the training corps and scouts. We bear witness to their traumas and moments of joy, their victories and losses, and naturally we view anyone hurting them as our enemies. Nevertheless, in both universes, the distinction between villain and hero is not so clear-cut. Even bad guys, quote-unquote, such as Rainer, Bertold and Abby, have their own backstories. They are also victims of the cruel world in which they live, just like our beloved Joel, Ellie, Eren, Armin and Mikasa. The bad guys, quote-unquote, also think that they are the good guys, quote-unquote, in whatever they are trying to accomplish, which highlights how the characters and the players and viewers are all blinded by cycles of violence. These two works of art mirror so beautifully the human psyche and humanity itself. The perspective shift also echoes something that Owen jokes to Abby when they first visit the Seattle Aquarium.
Because they're an insane cult, that's why.
Well, in the QZs, people would refer to the Fireflies as terrorists. Fanatics.
Don't say shit like that at the stadium, okay?
In the last instance that he spent with Ellie, Joel says,
"If somehow the Lord gave me a second chance at that moment, I would do it all over again."
I believe that his words can be interpreted within the larger context of breaking cycles of violence. If only Joel had a second chance, he would certainly repeat the same cycle of violence all over because of his love for Ellie. Yet there is no more second chance. What is done, and he's now appreciating the present in which Ellie is safe and happy. So in a way, Joel has shifted his perspective on life and found a new purpose and put an end to his own cycle of violence. The fight, quote-unquote, that Joel evoked in the last scene of part 1.
No matter what, you keep finding something to fight for.
It's not a literal fight, but rather a spiritual struggle for a better life beyond violence, which he gifted Ellie by teaching her how to swim, how to play the guitar, and dedicating the rest of his life to her, while simultaneously hoping that Ellie would continue this metaphorical fight and gift it back to the world. There are no words to describe the emotional fatigue that I felt while playing The Last of Us Part 2, and my amazement of Attack on Titan episode after episode. I felt pain, joy, anger, disgust, frustration, grief, hope and despair all at once. I felt sorry for monsters and humans. The clever use of non-linear storytelling and flashbacks in both universes is just a remarkable way to explore conflicting perspectives. It's thought-provoking narratives like The Last of Us Part 2 and Attack on Titan that challenge me emotionally and personally and help me come to terms with my own traumas and struggles. And most importantly, these are the stories that truly master the art of writing very human stories, or what I call VHS.
He's got that videotape thing. Huh. Dong of the Wolf. Smash Brandy's cooch. Are these? It's porn.
I mean, not this kind of VHS. Back to what I was saying. With nuances and differing tones, altogether showcasing the epitomes of human resilience when facing and overcoming traumas, because there's always something beautiful beyond the destruction to look forward to. Thank you for watching this video and listening to my thoughts. Let me know what you think by leaving a comment below, and please subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Cheerio!